Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications. And Brian, let's get started with a story we have been covering for many weeks now, and that is the UAW strike. Ford has reached a tentative deal with the UAW. So what broke the logjam?
Yeah, that's a great question. You don't always know as these closed door negotiations, so we don't know exactly what broke the logjam, but the final agreement actually doesn't appear that different than Ford's opening offer, which is what makes this whole process very interesting. So it went on for five, almost 6 weeks, this strike. For Ford, it could be here essentially over, but they came out of the blocks with a really strong proposal of 20% over the contract of the agreement, 20% wage increases, in addition to cost of living adjustments built in, the rise from your starting wage to the top tier. They basically cut in half. You know, there are several aspects that Ford put on the table that made that the offer. But then the UAW kind of hit them pretty hard with closing down the Kentucky truck plant, which is their most profitable plant. And this was kind of puzzling to some observers to say, why would they do that? Ford's the one who had the best offer on the table. Why are they kind of picking on Ford? Well, Ford has the biggest U.S. workforce of all three auto companies. So more than Stellantis, more than General Motors. They're the ones that have like doubled down on reshoring and more employment in the U.S. So while you would think that would make them the UAW's favorite, it also makes them the most important to get the best contract from. And if they could get an agreement from Ford that they felt good about, they know it puts pressure on the others. So they played rough with Ford, even though Ford was the first one with the best offer, and really by putting the best offer on the table, they're the ones that it costs the most to do the best offer for because they have a higher concentration of employees in the United States. So I think really what happened was the negotiation went on long enough, and so UAW started at 46% wage increase, and Ford started at 20. They're ending up at 25, and but Ford had already moved up to 23. So it really did the last 2% make that big a difference? I think what you saw in the last couple of weeks was a show, basically, that the union was ready to actually negotiate and come to an agreement. So they hit them hard with this Kentucky truck plant strike, most profitable operation that Ford has, to deliver the final contract. And really, it was to their members, like, look how tough we got, and we got you this contract. So that's really what I think, as opposed to some big move, which it does not appear to have been a big move in what Ford was prepared to do. They moved up a little, but essentially, I think it was that a lot of what we saw in the last couple of weeks was more theater than substantive negotiations.
And so what are the short-term ramifications here?
Well, the short-term ramifications, I think, for Ford in particular, and I imagine they're doing 25% wage increases, but that's over a 4-year contract. But there's an immediate 11% increase. Now they already pay about 20%, or I'm sorry, 10% higher than the average auto industry jobs in the United States. Ford is already 10% higher than their foreign competitors. So this puts a lot of pressure on them to reduce expenses elsewhere. But here's the other thing, Sarah, that I think is maybe the government people haven't necessarily caught on about. They make money on their gas vehicles. They lose money on their electric vehicles. This contract will put such cost pressures on them. They have to make money. They have to concentrate on the areas where they have the highest profit margins. And so I could see Ford really having to shift a lot of their effort, sales, and production to the areas that are most profitable. And that means that after a real ramp up in electric vehicles, at a loss with the idea that someday in the future they'd be profitable, I think this is really going to put some guardrails on how fast Ford can move their market in that direction.
Any other kind of long-term ramifications there?
Well, the long-term ramifications are I think that's going to be the most important aspect, of course, for the industry and workers in that industry. There are two things. It's just the cold hard truth of the cost of automation is compared to the cost of payroll. And so this changes those dynamics. I think there are some things that Ford and the others will look to see what they can automate so that they can lower their overall personnel costs. I also think that that suppliers in the supply chain are going to feel pressure like they've never felt before. So Ford can't just, and General Motors and Stellantis eventually, they can't just raise their prices on everything. So uh, they're going to have to find areas where they can reduce costs. So those in the supply chain, I think, are going to get squeezed for that. And then here's the other thing, and I think really probably the one that I'm most concerned about, the long-term ramification I'm most concerned about, is that while there's been a big effort on reshoring manufacturing production to the United States, I don't expect that you're going to see this would like push growth or more of the new growth to places like China and Southeast Asia. But I do think that Canada and Mexico probably are winners in this agreement, in that the growth. It's not like they're going to take a plant in Michigan and move it to Mexico or move it to Canada, but in terms of the growth, where they're adding jobs, where they're adding production, where they're making new investments, I think going forward it changes the value proposition that places like Mexico and Canada have to offer. By the way, Canada has been doing a lot in the last 5 years to make themselves more business friendly, and so they've seen a lot of growth as a result, and they've seen a bunch of population growth. Population growth in Ontario is as impressive as population growth in Texas and Florida.
All right, now obviously Ford is not the only automaker. What do we know about GM and Stellantis?
Yeah, so there's all eyes go to them now. There's a lot of pressure on General Motors and Stellantis. The fact with Ford reaching a tentative agreement that I do expect will be accepted by the membership. The General Motors and Stellantis, their offers on the table are not as good as Ford's offer. I think it kind of pigeonholes it. Um, they're going to have to operate in that type of a context. And I think one of the biggest kind of open sticky items, especially for General Motors, are these joint ventures that they have for batteries, and they also have one with Honda for their for hydrogen vehicles. And so in these joint ventures, do the union contracts apply to those areas? UAW really wants the answer to be yes. And General Motors has signaled a willingness maybe to go there, but joint ventures in the U.S., I think that's just a really big sticking point that I think is a big kind of unanswered question at this point, and one that matters more perhaps to General Motors than anybody else.
All right, what else do we need to know? Kind of what happens now?
So what'll happen now? Tentative agreement. Here's how the process works. Ford and the negotiating team came to a tentative agreement, but the UAW has a Ford Council. So the first step is this tentative agreement goes to the Ford Council, and it's not at Ford. This is at the UAW. They have to approve it to go to the ballot for the membership at Ford. Then Ford membership will vote for it. I saw a strong and ringing endorsement from Shawn Fain. He seems very proud. The leader of the UAW seems very proud of this agreement. It would be a big blow to everybody if the membership did not accept it. We've seen some other unions vote down agreements lately. I'd be surprised if that happened here. But then the other ramification is that they called off the strike at Ford plants immediately. So they're not even waiting for the vote. That's how confident they are that people, as soon as they can get these factories back into running, which by the way is not like flipping a switch, as soon as they get them back up and running, you'll see Ford production start up even ahead of that vote probably.
Okay, well, we actually have a special guest joining us today. Brian, I'm going to turn it back to you to introduce her.
Yeah, Ann Callahan is joining us from Consumers Credit Union. Consumers Credit Union, of course, sponsors this briefing, keeping our members up to date, but an awesome partner for us. So we like to just have some conversations every once in a while, make sure that our members know great resource and financial partner that you have. So, Ann, thanks for joining us. And I think it would probably be a great place to start just to talk about your engagement, the way that you operate in engaging businesses, small businesses in particular, and communities across our state.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Sarah, for having me today. Well, I'm the business engagement manager for the credit union, and really what my job is to connect our resources, both on the personal and business side, to those individuals and business owners throughout our footprint. As of right now, we have 28 locations. Our headquarters are in Kalamazoo. We go as far north as Muskegon. We have signed an agreement for some land in Big Rapids, so we're really excited about that. And we go as far east as Lansing right now. We have 2 offices currently open and 2 on standby to open up in 24. So we're super excited about our growth, and it's all been organic. So there's nothing better than that. So
Yeah, very good. Well, Ann, I've actually been on some panels with your team over the last several months and talking about workforce, attracting talent, and so maybe just give the audience a little bit of insight in what that program is, what the panels are all about.
yeah, no, great. And we appreciate your time and all that too, Brian. So in 23, we developed a partnership with local chambers, businesses, and economic associations. And we were hearing feedback that finding talent and retaining it is a top priority. So we developed a 45-minute presentation with representatives at the state level with Brian, and then locally from a standpoint of our um, human resources, Sean Premer is our chief marketing officer, chief HR officer, I should say, at Consumers Credit Union. I think, did I lose you guys?
No, we're here.
Oh, you're here? Okay, so my screen went out on me. So
Oh,
I'll back up. So Sean Premer is our chief human resource officer at the credit union. And then we have a local business owner and business partner and Scott Vogel. He's the owner and operator of 2 Nothing Bunk Cake locations here in Greater Grand Rapids. And our panel is moderated by Lynn Jarman Johnson, who is our chief marketing officer at Consumers. And Lynn brings the energy, as we all know, and the audience participation to the discussion. So it's been so well received with our first panel that was in Ada, Cascade, and Forest Hills that we've now since done one in Lansing that Brian also participated in. And then in Jenison, in partnership with our Granville, Jenison, Hudsonville, and Walker chambers. And we are in the planning stages right now to do a similar panel in Muskegon in April of 2024. So we're super excited. And again, Brian, we appreciate your time and insights on those panels.
yeah, and they always come with desserts from Nothing But Cakes.
Yes, yes, nothing better than that.
Yeah, awesome business owner and great culture that he's building there, and great
Mhm.
insight. But it taps into this discussion on talent, which is so just on everybody's mind, and to like the availability of talent, but also just dedicated, motivated, the best talent that people are trying to find today. What type of tools you guys can really do kind of lean into this talent discussion? What type of tools you guys have available to assist with your members?
Yes, we have a program that's called Consumers at Work, which provides financial education and wellness to employees. It's a complimentary program, and it's one of our tenets of giving back to the communities where we serve. So the program is available in person or virtually through our microsites, and it has educational support and resources. And also, it's available in several different languages. So, as we all know, our business owners are employing individuals where English is not their primary language. So, our microsites are translated into those other languages. And there's tutorials and topics such as how do I create a budget? How do I make my paycheck work for me? Which is a great piece because, as you mentioned in your earlier discussion about the UAW, We're just trying to get employers to let them know to their staff that we're paying you a great wage, and we're going to try to make it work for you, so you're not going across the street for an additional 50 cents or a dollar. So we've really built it out, and the point that it's complementary to is a great benefit add that employers can add to their benefit portfolio without, affecting their bottom line, but really building that engagement and culture and their with their employees.
Outstanding tools. And so, of course, we greatly appreciate our partnership with you. So, I want to give you an opportunity to, for the pitch. I mean,
Yeah.
why do business? What do you bring to the table and for small business owners?
Well, we bring root beer. So if you haven't had a root beer drop from us, you guys, we do bring root beer. So be on the lookout. We are passionate about building relationships and working with local business owners to meet their financial goals. So our business services team has the capability to do cash management services along with varying types of lending, such as credit lines, commercial loans, SBA loans, and credit cards. And our underwriting is all done locally, which allows our decisions to be made based on local economic conditions and trends. So that really kind of sets us apart from some of our competition in that lending space as well.
So, Ann, you do have you seem like you have a really cool job, or at least the parts that I see in the way that we engage. So let's how about just the final thing here? What do you like best about working at consumer?
Yeah, Brian, I can't complain. I love my job. Every day is different in that I connect and build those relationships with people in our communities where we're currently operating. So I have the chance to listen to their needs and ultimately introduce them to the experts on the Consumers Credit Union team. And the best part of it all is to see that partnership blossom and grow. So it's been really rewarding. It was actually 3 years on October 19th that I've been here. So it's excellent. I love it.
Time flies. Well, thanks so much, Ann. We really appreciate you. We appreciate consumers, the support to our members, and especially this briefing as well. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, you guys. Have a great afternoon.
All right, yes, thanks, Anne. And for anyone tuning in right now, you can visit consumerscu.org to learn more. So Brian, we have a few more topics to cover today, starting with Speaker of the House. We have a new speaker. What do we know about Mike Johnson?
At the federal level, we do have a speaker. It was quite an ordeal. I haven't really, at least during the time of my lifetime, as long as I've been paying attention to it, I've never seen like this type of a situation. They removed a speaker, the conference picks a replacement, but not everybody supports them on the floor. There's not enough of margin, and so they just kind of went through their fourth candidate before they found somebody. And Mike Johnson, so he's from Northwest Louisiana. So imagine, we're a mitten. They're imagine a boot is up toward, I say, like 150 miles east of Dallas, to give you an idea of where his district is from, but in Louisiana. So not a name that people would have ever thought of, because he's a fairly quiet representative. Leaders around the world and even people in the United States Senate. I think it was Susan Collins from Maine who said, "I'll have to Google him," because she didn't know him. Now, we did have some lower level leadership positions before, but just not a big personality, and that's probably what worked in his favor. The early reports, people describe him are that he's very quiet and meek, has a gentle demeanor, which is unusual these days. That's not to say that that people might find, not to say that his positions are moderate. He's in the social conservative part of the Republican Party, which has been kind of, I would say, generally de-emphasized at the leadership level for a while now. So this is kind of an unusual profile to have in a Speaker of the House, and so that it ended up being the person that everybody could accept or get on board and support, was somebody that had very little profile, and therefore apparently made few enemies. So that part, there is still, especially in the South, there's a section that really emphasize, or mainly within the Republican Party, mainly about social issues. This is definitely one of them. This representative is one of them who is the new speaker. But when you do play the role of the speaker, you have to represent or figure out how to get the entire body on the same page. And I think that's really the biggest question. The first thing that they did, though, was to recognize or to pass a resolution in support of Israel. So that would, now coming from a social conservative, that's not surprising that that would be an early initiative, is if you will, and they've got some catch-up work to do, and right around the blocks they've got some pretty big issues. Remember that the thing that got McCarthy kicked out before was working with the Democrats on finding a bipartisan solution to avoid a government shutdown. But that was just a short-term solution, kind of knocking on the door of what to do then. And so we'll see. It's a big question mark, because really most people have no idea who Mike Johnson is, but we're about to find out.
And so you mentioned, one pressing issue that will be on the top of the docket, but are there any other issues that you expect them to have to deal with right away?
Yeah, I mean, basically you've got the idea of a budget for the government. So they got a short window here to work in, and one of his main priorities that he has, remembered, doesn't represent now just himself. He represents the whole body, but as an individual, his own kind of self-stated priorities include reducing government spending. So that does set up, the battle lines with a speaker that maybe would be leaning toward the pathway of actual reduction in spending, as opposed to reducing the rate of growth in spending, which is kind of where the leadership had been in excuse me, in recent years. But also is military aid, and part of this is the spending considerations, but military aid to Israel and Ukraine. So this is going to be kind of a complicated issue to navigate. I don't think that they'll find much problem with military aid to Israel. There's a lot of Democrats and Republicans that are just on board with that, and I think that there'll be some dissension, but probably not much. But with Ukraine being more than a year into this, what's the plan? How long is it going to go? How much is going to be spent? You can definitely see some fractures in support there starting to form, but still among many, again, with Republicans and some Republicans and most of the Democrats, strong support for Ukraine. That looks like probably an early place for some real confrontation, in that the part of the Republican conference that kicked out McCarthy before, the previous Speaker of the House. A big question is, do they give one of who they consider to be one of their own, Mike Johnson, new Speaker Mike Johnson, do they give him more leeway to work, more latitude, put like on a longer leash before they try to take him out too? So like I think that's the does he have room to work, and how will that part of the party that created the environment where he became Speaker, do they give him room to work and get things done, or not? I really, there's a lot of things that I could see that going either way. Usually I have a pretty good sense of where these things are going, and this is one where it is really hard to tell, because again, I'm just like everybody else, just being introduced to Mike Johnson, a person who growing up, his biggest goal is to be the fire chief in the town that he now represents in Congress. And his dad was a firefighter, just reading up on it. But then he got hurt. Johnson ended up going off to college versus his family. But the fact that he's been such a quiet person in the legislature thus far, it'd be a very, very interesting next couple of months to see how a person that has not been on the leadership stage navigates through some pretty complicated issues. But again, his quiet demeanor may end up being his biggest asset in making things happen.
All right, so let's move on and talk about some news here in Michigan, and that is that the state has a new budget director.
Yeah, so Chris Harkins, the current budget director, has moved on to, or will be moving on in the coming weeks or a month maybe, to Michigan State. Got a job in finance at Michigan State University, and so budget director positions do turn over pretty often. And this is because it is a burnout type of a job. I mean, going through the budget process, it's so intense, and usually budget director will just make it through a couple, and then that position turns over. The governor is filling that position with Jennifer Flood, who is a deputy chief of staff in the governor's office today. So Jennifer Flood has been with the governor's office since day one, is considered to be one of those top decision makers, one of the, a lot of people have titles in government, but like who really makes decisions? Jen Flood has been one of the real decision makers in the governor's office since day one, and the administration has really kind of grown in influence. So the appointment to budget director, it does make a lot of sense. And with somebody like Jen, I think that there's a good chance that you might have a budget director that sees through the rest of the time of Whitmer's gubernatorial experience here. So this would be kind of a trusted insider of the Whitmer administration. And by the way, somebody that we know well. This is, if we're reaching out or we want to share an opinion with the governor's office, Jen Flood is one that we go to, one that is proven to be quite accessible, and to hear you out, hear the positions of a reasonable and experienced person, and for the Whitmer, I think Whitmer administration, a smart choice.
All right, finally, there is a research and development tax credit that's being proposed in the House. Can you share what's in that proposal and how it could be relevant to our small business members?
Yeah, we're engaged in this. It came up, this discussion was, should the state add in a tax credit for research and development expenses, that for what's happening in Michigan? Do we want to encourage more research and development, in other words? Our goal in this is to make sure that the research and development credit is done in a way that it is accessible to small businesses. The way it's been proposed and introduced and moved through committee, it creates a fund, and you apply to the fund, and then Treasury decides to award you part of this, it's almost like a tax credit certificate, and then you apply it to your taxes later on. It's basically like a grant. We're not crazy about that type of a structure, because most small businesses are not going to have access to it at that point. You'll have a small number of players that know how to work that system that will get those credits. What we would rather is something right in the tax code, where you don't apply for it. There's no government bureaucracy to decide. You get awarded a tax credit certificate. It's just like the child tax credit or something like that. It's just in the tax code. You have children, they qualify for the tax credit, you claim it on your return, and you're done. It's automatic in that sense. We'd like to see a research and development credit that is automatic in the same way, where somebody, if they engage in qualified activities in research and development, they just claim it on their tax return and they get it. Like that type of a straightforward, simple approach that would not require any additional bureaucracy or administration, and a business would be able to make a decision on the front end in terms of where and how they're doing their research and development, to do it in a way that they could depend on. They would know that they were going to get it. They wouldn't have to apply and wait for the state to approve it. The other thing that we're really, really big on, and that's very important to us, is that the research and development be industry agnostic. Right? We don't like the idea of government saying, well, here's a tax credit, but only for tech firms, or only for people in automotive, or only for we think research and development is applicable and beneficial across all different industries. So it should be based on research and development activities, not research and development activities limited to favored industries. So those are some of the things we're looking to do. And so it's an ongoing process, but as introduced, not quite where they need to be yet, but we're hopeful that we can get some modifications made and make sure that this is a tool that our members and small businesses across the board will have access to.
All right, well, that is the show for today. I do want to invite you, if you are in the Lansing area or will happen to be in the Lansing area, next Wednesday, we're hosting one of our owner-to-owner events at 4 p.m. You can learn more on our website. But we'll be back here on Monday. In the meantime, have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.